Okay. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, my voice is loud enough and you can hear me. Tonight's episode is a bit different than all the other episodes. So, if you're a typical, um, if you typically tune into these talks, this talk is different. This talk is actually it's kind of like I'm asking a very big question and I'm trying to answer it, and it's based on this system I've kind of been spending time to design. And I feel I have found an approach to how we can advance civilization. And on some level, there has to be a sort of simplicity and clarity factor to it, that it's easily accessible. On the other hand, it wants to be all inclusive. So it's so I've kind of in my mind, I'm seeing a film of how perhaps the future can unravel like a chess game. And the focus is this idea, Civilization 2.0, which I've spoken about. But before Civilization 2.0 can occur, and I'll tell you what that is in a second, but if you're new, before Civilization 2.0 can occur, right now we're in Civilization 1.0, and there needs to be certain great transformations. I call them the great transformations, but they are actually shifts in the outcome of certain systems. And so I began kind of seeing life or Civilization 1.0 as an accumulated result, aggregate result of all the systems that are active, okay, various programs. So I want to speak to you in this episode. Hopefully, I can get into Civilization 2.0 and beyond Phase 3. But right now, I want to speak about that phase, that gap in the middle between Civilization 1.0 and Civilization 2.0. And if you want to know how I'm defining Civilization 2.0, Civilization 2.0 is this effort that is has a 2000 year time span. That means the moment Civilization 2.0 starts, this initiative, it's going to be 2000 years. And its beginning is actually the moment actually it arrives is when sky cities are lifted up into the sky, all sky cities. So when we have, um, in some sense, anyways, I'll get to that. We've built a unique technology to live in our orbits. So Civilization 2.0 is an attempt to get the, you can say, inefficient human uh, influence on the surface of the Earth into the orbit. And it's this kind of incredible solution to not just overpopulation, but also to nationalism. So these are things that I can speak about. For example, the national program, that's how we as beings are dividing ourselves in groups, and that needs to go through a certain transformation. The other is a cultural program, how culture is being experienced and how it's going to in some sense become soon infused with cyberspace culture. And then there's the educational program, which means that we have to transform our educational systems. Because if you think about it, a species where human beings keep entering this system of ours, this world of ours, they are being educated. And what does that mean? That means education is another way of saying you are learning the common language, okay, of your world. And so the way the educational system is inspired, it is not causing people to want to evolve what we know. It's just making them accept what was known and not ask the question and run towards a sort of waste of a survival in a system that never saw them. So it's kind of very fascinating that human behavior changes in accordance to what it sees. So if it can see a new option, you can technically live a new life as a human being. So you got to see that there's a relationship that needs to occur with the mind. For now, in this talk, I'll keep it to the educational program, the cultural program, and the national program. Right now, I'm going to say something short about Civilization 2.0. Pretty much, it has three phases, and the idea is we focus all resources on building technology that can lift the city and human infrastructure into the orbit. Do you know? And after we have lifted up, imagine that day comes. I gave it a prediction of maybe 600 years from now. Right now it's 2020, so maybe in 2620, it's going to be maybe 2622 is going to be the actual first day of Civilization 2.0's beginning. This is, of course, I am kind of seeing a situation and then giving my response to it. These are ideas that anyways. So in that 600-year time span, I want to kind of take the listener's attention to what is the inspiration of human activity. And so the phase, oh, I forgot to say, the phase one, phase two, phase three. Phase one, get the civilization into the air, get human influence into the air, utilize three-dimensional space. Phase two, heavenize Earth, build Earth heavena. Pretty much as we live in our orbit, we return Earth back into a natural paradise, you know botanists, plant activities and projects, pretty much all those people who've been researching plants now, then it will be like your grandchildren's time to shine. But anyways, phase three would be a self-conscious effort of Civilization 2.0 to wonder again why it is in the sky. And there are two options. Either it can, in some sense, return back to the earth. We start rebuilding the earth, but I don't think it's going to be necessary at that point. I'm kind of keeping phase two of Civilization 2.0 as a backup earth. Hopefully, while we're in the orbit in that 2,000 years, and phase three, during phase three, we're kind of wondering, it's going to be a situation where I think that we're going to have interstellar visions and ambitions. So it's like when we get a sense of living in space, not just on land, that is going to revolutionize our psychology. Do you know? It's pretty much, you know what it is. It's the strategy I'm proposing. It's like we imagine 8 billion beings are living in a house and they're destroying the house, and so it's as if for a moment we bring them into a tent in the yard, or tents, many tents in the yard, while the house goes over remodeling and restructuring, for it to be redesigned. And yeah. Now, I'm going to share some ideas on how I perceive human nature to even consider that, or how I'm even considering that nationalism as a program, culture as a program, education as a program. You see, I got to take you back to a point where I was, in some sense, wondering about what is here. Simply said, what is here, without any It's as if for a second I found myself in a moment where I put away everything I had heard. It's as if for a second my own knowledge became meaningless and I was looking at the unknown again. And as I was looking at the unknown, I got a very profound realization that civilization 2.0, I remember saying, I forgot to mention, but it's a yin yang civilization. And what that means is we are under the impression that we have to be just one kind of being, or we are one kind of being. We have this impression in the mainstream, but it is not the case. Because objectively, yes, there is one physical body that appears when you speak to someone, but when you speak to them, how their intelligence is processing, it's as if it has access to data in an invisible room you can't see. So other people's memories are like rooms they're in where you're not in. Do you know? And it's the same with you. You know, your own memories are a space of intelligent access. Now, because the mind is evocational in nature, what that means is it's kind of like a projector that just started running. Uh, and communication is projection, is in some sense evocation of design. The idea of the yin yang civilization will be that people are not being judged by their singular dimension. But the yin yang civilization, civilization 2.0, has this consideration that we have been treating people as singular dimensional beings. And because we have been treating them like that, we have been putting who they are all in the physical impression we see. So the efforts to for us to go how the cultural program will change is actually with an awareness and a revolutionization in language and the experience of language. Right now, we as human beings, we think. How can I tell you? If I ask you, you know, for a second, if people forgot language, all knowledge would be gone. In some sense, all knowledge that has passed the test of time. One's relationship with their self, or let me say it like this, we think it's just the self here, but it is a self that is codependent with the world. And what does that mean? That means how you are being an individual right now is because of how you have considered yourself separate from the world. That means, how am I not earth? How am I on earth? Because I have limbs. And these limbs are a part of the identity, a separation from the surface of the earth. Do you know? And then there is this inner separation, which is the subjective realm. Now, the subjective realm, and an idea which I was so shocked that no, they didn't speak about it in my time in the educational system and university. It was many have spoken about an objective evolution. Pretty much Darwinism is Darwining, but uh, so what I mean by that is that we have studied a sort of objective evolution, and biological evolutionary biologists have done great contribution in that domain, where we have kind of looked at the human body and we're like, just whoever you are, if you kind of don't consider evolution, let me tell you something. Put your palms on the ground and for a second sit four-limbed, and then you'll see why there are limits to the movement of your wrists. You know, it's like it's very obvious that we were studying the two-dimensional, then we came on two legs, then we stood on two legs, we literally divided the limbhood. And so now we use three-dimensional. How can I say it? It's like we can climb trees now. Before. anyways, what I'm saying simply is that we have explanations for an objective evolution, but the reason the mind is ambiguous and vague is because we do not have proper explanations for the subjective evolution. We don't even consider that. I think I'm like the early bird using the word. And so this subjective evolution, I kind of found a relationship personally in my own inquiry that really the subjective evolution was a repeat of the objective evolution in another dimension. And believe it or not, our minds are still in the jungles, but our bodies are in the concrete jungle, you know? And so what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that the objective evolution was an awareness of the separation of limbs and body from world. The subjective evolution is an awareness that in some sense the all materiality is being observed through an unknown, and I don't want to say unknown, well, let me say it like this. It's like um, we noticed ourselves as an object. Now we've noticed ourselves as a subject, and the way it occurred was in some sense the creature looked in the mirror or found some sort of pond to look into, or I don't know, you can say the it was ice or something and noticed its own shadow, or through that way, the creature became conscious that it is a subject to itself. And the moment the subjective evolution began, it had to be a replication of the objective world. So, really, what we think imagination is, it's like it requires to some degree, it's like a copy paste of reality with deviations, you know, with twists that could be infinite. And so in some sense, I have noticed that we are very comfortable acknowledging the objective realm. I mean, who can deny matter? It's like here. But when we come to subjects, and when we have two people, let's say person A communicating to person B, we tend to think that's just person A and this is person B, but we don't realize the hidden dimensions behind their eyes, which both person A and B don't have access to each other's inner realms. The subjective evolution, or I say entrance into the subjective realm, or another way I've called it is your inner realms. So person A is speaking to person B, or person B is listening to person A, or person A is listening. They're just communicating. Okay, so let's say before communication, let's say person A is giving a talk, and person B comes there. Okay, and person B comes and hears this person give a talk. Okay, so person B will realize that whatever he or she sees out of person A is in some sense, how would I say it? Person B's inner realms are not visible to person A. Person A's inner realms are not visible to person B. That is why we communicate, so those inner realms can lead to a third co-creative realm where we feel we're two people are seeing the same thing. So this is something interesting that most people are trying to. I think this is the case, especially when you see lovers in modern culture. It's as if they are each trying to create their own paradise through the other. Okay, and how can I tell you? You're either being pulled towards your own inner realm. There's a gravitational pull, let's say, to the inner realm. So you're being either pulled to your own inner realm. You're either being pulled to the inner realm of others, or your inner realm and the inner realm of others lead to a new realm. And that's the magnificence of pretty much debate and oration. That's why I love the concept of School of Athens. The School of Athens was a place where it was as if like that was the TV back in the day. That was like a virtual reality. People would go and sit silently, and then two great philosophers would come and debate. And when they would debate, can you imagine? It's like no TV, nothing, words. Words are projecting images behind your eyes. And imagine listening to a grand debate. And so I find that the kind of thing that's really occurring with reading even is that those people who read, they're watching the film behind their eyes. Those people who watch TV are watching the film in front of their eyes. And life has a sort of animate quality to it. It suddenly, how can I tell you? It's like some days are sunny, some days are rainy. Does that mean it's always sunny? Does that mean it's always rainy? No, it just means that certain conditions make the state of mind appear in a certain way. And when the person realizes how much of actually your intelligence as a being is kept by nature, you'll kind of feel as if you're already home, you know, especially if you've dwelled in the archetype of a transmigrating soul, you know, bound in some sort of karmic loop. So for me, it's like as long as man can see the unknown, has the unknown in his sight, his knowledge can evolve. Any system that makes the unknown no longer be able to be accessed, or there's a creative factor to it, it's the death of art in civilization when we forget the unknown. But the beautiful thing is that can never be done. So that means the creative momentum for our intelligence is actually how small we are in a world so big is an advantage. We're endlessly creating relationships between small things and big things, or small things in a big thing. So the subject, so it's an awareness. I've also written here the educational program, and I'm going to get to that after the cultural program. But pretty much the sense of identity has to come into a more of a multidimensional tolerance. You see, it's like the religions were at war because they felt that they had to declare one truth to them all. You know, it was as if like the world was a ring and there was one person who wanted to wear it, or one ideology or narrative or story that wanted to wear this ring. And so, really, this lack of tolerance for the multidimensional and for the unknown led to the strict savageness of knowledge fighting till the day it dies. So, when you look at ideological systems outside, you can see that some of them are have an absolute relationship with themselves. That means, for example, a person, imagine being a child raised in a religious environment. What really is going on is that the child is not a philosopher. The child is just a child, and its environment is becoming its knowing. You know, so when you look at what you really know as a person, it's what you've been exposed to, or what you've been around, or better yet, what you've been drawn to, where there's been a conscious application of your mind. And anything you kind of, let me tell you, it's like effort is the most crucial thing. That means, regardless of what you think you are as a being, keep exerting effort, because that effort is the privilege of the day. That effort is really what I find sets karma straight, sincere effort. So, anyways, there needs to be a revolutionization in our awareness that we actually, all our inner realms, like our feet, our bodies, check this out, our bodies are in this on the same earth, but our minds are in a linguistic simulation that is trying to see the same earth. So when you realize like a percentage of how you consider yourself as a being right now is the abstraction of your wakefulness, and in regards to, we can say the word imagination in certain states of mind doesn't exist, by the way, this concept of reality and imagination. Reality and imagination exists because we are considering something real, then there is the unknown. So you see, when the known looks at the unknown, there is imagination and reality. When the unknown looks through the known, there is no imagination and reality. It's one expression. You know, that means the universe is simultaneously being multidimensional and singular. And believe it or not, witnessing itself through the void. The update occurs through space. Have you ever gone through an experience in your life where just the space after let kind of gave you a chance to, for example, it's like the absence of the activity gave you a sense of being able to observe the activity. And that's what I think potentially may happen when we, as beings, physically transition out of this plane of existence, we pilot out of this plane of existence, is that we actually enter a space of observance, as if the whole life was a dance, and after the dance, the dancer is just laying back and watching the video. So, what is culture? Of course, we have scholars like Terence McKenna saying culture is not your friend. Ideology is not your friend. Civilization is going the wrong direction. How can it be your friend? And so there are these ideas. But the thing is that the way I saw these programs, of course, we got to consider people's inner realms are new, or let me say it like this. Um, if we have one concept and we tell it to three people, do we have three of the same concept, or do we have three different concepts? And I feel we have three different concepts. I feel the addition of a conscious mind changes the nature of the work. Um, so think about civilization 2.0 being 8 billion, kind of the eight and the unified effort, creative effort of 8 billion beings. It's going to be fascinating, actually. Krishnamurti has this very interesting quote. He says, tradition becomes our security, and when the mind is secure, it is in decay. And the whole belief system game and lack of awareness to the language threshold. Language threshold is a concept I've created when experience moves in domains where it can't be put into language or the words don't exist yet. You see, language, if we treat it as a technology, we can update it. If we don't treat it as a technology, if we treat it as ourselves, how can we update it? We just feel we are it. We can't do anything about it. So it's like it's so crucial that anything a person wants to change, they have to be able to observe. If you can't observe it, what are you changing? You know. So the conscious mind engages itself into existence through the accumulation, and let's say one state is like the how your being, which is what sensory perception is accessing the mind sphere, and in some sense the other way view is how is this sensory perception being in some sense filtered or translated into a sort of character in a story that thinks it can know and it can't know. So you see, it's like there is a theater behind our eyes and we're acting there, right? And we're not acting as a body, we're acting as the intention of change, you know? So anyways, let me move beyond the cultural program. And guys, the reason I'm calling these programs is because if you look at it kind of like a phone, they're occupying the energy of the human being, and the energy of the human being is their attention. I can't tell you the moment I realized this, I laughed and I think I mastered the ability to endlessly be energetic. Because it's kind of like a child. If you think about it, the human child, it's like you give it a toy, it's happy, it's smiling, it's giggling. You take the toy away, it starts crying. But when you give the toy back, it starts being happy. Now check this out. That child is too young to be an individual to itself. Okay, imagine a super young child. So if that child is too young to itself, it managed to instantly change its state of being by looking at the thing. Do you see? It was like, how is it? How is it that in one instant the child's exuberance and attention and energy levels changed? So really, our attention is the source of our life, and to study our attention is the privilege of a lifetime. Mr. Within, uh, I've said it in these talks that you kind of have to. Um, the seer of sight is unseen. Therefore, it means that the yin yang civilization is not just acknowledging the creature as known particles, but as an unknown field of activity. And that's an advanced civilization because it's giving you more potential than you could potentially have. You know, that's the thing. It's strange. Sometimes the world cares about behavior, sometimes it doesn't. Now we're moving this whole thing about political correctness. It's as if people are caring for the attitude, even though it's political correctness. Like my opinion on it is it's a symptom of the evolution of our relationship as a species with language. We're becoming more sensitive. We're getting bored of thoughts of ourselves, and we're looking at the thoughts of others. You know, but the thought of self is the center of your, at least archetypal universe. The educational program, ooh, what can be said? So I feel certain changes need to occur. These are, of course, uh, I'm just one guy in a universe of a billion and trillion stars talking, but this is what I see so far, that the educational program, first of all, it seems like it has its kind of the way it's designed. If you were looking at the educational system as a designer, and you're like, okay, let's see how did they design this? And so you see that it was as if there was this inspiration from the 1900s, that I am telling you, the educational system we have now is an educational system that was developed at the time of war. Because it was looking for the best soldiers it could take, because soldiers had to memorize information in one bunker and run to the other bunker and be able to completely repeat it, as if they had to pass the exam of relaying information before technology. And there was, of course, Morse code, but Morse code took a long time to, in some sense, translate, I believe. So it was a situation where soldiers had to be able to relay information. They had to be able to read, write, and speak. These were the main foundational things. It's as if each nation, you can kind of strangely say, maybe the war made nations think about the education system. I don't know, but anyways, guys, I need a quick breather. I'll be back in less than a minute. Okay. So an educational system, the educational system generally seems to be looking for soldiers with a certain skill ability. But if you look at it, really, we are 8 billion creatures with 8 billion different eyes, you know, with 8 billion, let me say, different DNA. And does it make sense that one educational system can fit all? Can one shoe size fit all feet? No. And that's what the educational system appears to me. It is interested for more economical survival, but the whole economical survival is an inefficient system. Because let me tell you, um, this can take me, kind of make me move to the national program. And this is the idea that why is the economical system inefficient? Because economics is, as they famously say, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And what that means is we are seeing a value. It's as if our eyes have opened in a world, and we are seeing value. And before the economical system, it was a sort of bartering system. Back in the day, people traded stuff with one another, you know. But the moment we opened our eyes to the value of currency, that's when things changed. That's when people were actually looking for money before they were looking for stuff, and this is outside of all the desire consumerism, uh, desire-ridden consumerism, like what I mean by that is we were trading stuff, then we decided to trade only one thing. Now the human being is working or how would I say it? Like, actually, let me take it a different angle. There's a scarcity in regards to resources. Okay, we're fighting over resources pretty much because we've bordered, because we've taken ownership. We've created nations or egos for chunks of land. Nationalism, you know. And so this sort of owning land and creating borders means pretty much first come first serve, nationhood developed. And so we have occupied uh, the surface of the earth. But imagine, just imagine if we were living in the orbit, earth would be an open resource to all. Do you know? It would be an endless resource. Civilization 2.0 is really just one strategy towards bypassing extinction, self extinction at least. In regards to this idea, so if you saw it as an all you can eat buffet, the earth, I said that think of it in other talks, I gave a good metaphor. I said, imagine you go to a buffet, all you can eat buffet, and you suddenly see different people have put their hands on the foods and they're not letting you access certain buffet foods. And you come up to the person and you're like, "Hey man, I wanna have, the broccoli." And the person is like, "No, no, this broccoli only belongs to people of this nation, people of the broccoli nation." And really, so what I mean by that is it's an arbitrary ownership of something really which every can make the lives of 8 billion people efficient. So we are playing ideological games over an infinite resource that if we just lived in the orbit, every imagine, of course this is in 600 years, I'm assuming this, I don't know the scale, I can't envision the scale, I can envision this, the at least the core kind of skeletal structure of how the civilization will look, but I can't see how its appearance, its face looks. It's too ahead in time. But anyways, so I thought about we have to solve the problem of nationalism. And what that means is that when we look at the concept of the United Nations, it's actually a bunch of separate nations acting united or communicating towards unity, right? So I thought, how can you make a bunch of, how can you unify a bunch of tribes? Okay. And so really I came and looked at it and I realized, what do we find in these tribes? What do we find in a nation? We find all sorts of people with skill levels, and at the core, we find human beings who are children and who are taught language, communication, identity. You know, identity politics begins from the first moment the doctor slaps your back, you know. In regards to an inner identity politics. Abstract, like there's an abstraction to language that we're holding as truth, and in certain states of mind, in certain areas we need to hold language as truth, and in certain areas we have to be loose or we can't progress or advance. So the way to kind of, you can say this is kind of a strategy towards unifying all the nations with a simple viewpoint. Actually, I feel there's no such thing as problems and solutions, believe it or not. I feel there's just different angles of perception. That's it. The good and the bad, that's just we impose that dualism over everything. You know, in reality, it's just phenomena happening. And so when I was looking at this, I was like, okay, what was Earth like before? And I realized, of course, there wasn't that much population, but it would be in a sense where imagine we can't just replace, we can't just say, okay, stop being a nation, stop being nations. You know? So what we need is that I realize without reducing the value that much to nullification, we will just call it Every nation, every country is a sub-nation, but a sub-nation of what? And I realize if it is known, there will be war. So they will be, so pretty much I have this view that nations in the future will all be sub nations of civilization, not even civilization 2.0, of an unknown, ever advancing nation. So it's as if people are like, are we part of one nation? It's like, yeah. And then somebody says, what does that one nation look like? And that's where it doesn't have an answer. Because I realized rather than a static relationship towards human development, we need a dynamic one. We have even the greats, Buckminster Fuller. He says in some sense when he's responding in regards to God, he says God is a verb, it's not a noun. When we look at Alfred Whitehead, he says that in some sense life is not just a bunch of particles, it's a process. And when you realize that we are known particles in an unknown process, that's when suddenly the world, the mask of the world falls, and direct experience runs towards its action. So if all the nations in the world suddenly appeared as sub-nations, and they were part of, I still haven't named this, but I think we can call it, I remember writing the name, but I can't remember it. What was that greater nation of all nations or sub-nation of called? What was it called? What was it called? I don't know. It would be the supreme nation, something like that. I can't remember it, but it's like it's going to be an unknown, ever infinite process towards human continuity. Because really, guys, even though we can reject the concept of eternity as much as we want, but pretty much evolution is the eternal urge for continuity. We want to continue as long as we can, and I don't know what, like, that seems to be what an eternal being would do. So this thing about yin yang, a yin yang civilization, acknowledging you not as just an embodiment of particles, but as a field, as a sort of process. That's why I use the concept of eternity so lightly, because it is in some sense the process. If we're connected to it, is in a sense infinite. Okay, like think about all the stars being born in this moment that I'm speaking about, or how many stars are dying. You see, it's like this massive process where in this cosmic landscape we find ourselves to be just some lantern in a room of conception. So anyways, nationalism, I feel nations have to treat each other as sub-nations of an ultimate united nation, and we can even call it the one nation. Okay, and the one nation, it doesn't have an image, it's an endless updating process. So I am kind of saying, instead of identifying with land, we identify with the endless evolution of human intelligence, you know. So in that way, imagine you suddenly have a commonality. Think about it, because nationalhood is arbitrary. So people, one person from another, from one nation, and another person from another nation, right? And when this point comes of the great transformation of nationalhood, in nationalhood, it would be a moment where, how can I tell you? Pretty much all children in the world can go anywhere in the world, um, of no cost, through whatever means of transformation we develop at that point, whether we access teleportation or not. Teleportation is really, I find, more confusing than time travel. But anyways. Anyways, I feel it is an ingenious tactic to move the civilization in the orbit. I feel this can be done. I feel if it is done, the Earth can restore. If there's once the Earth is restored, phase two of civilization 2.0 would be the backup plan, and then phase three of civilization 2.0 would be an interstellar approach. And something I gotta say, the reason I find it makes sense, why I feel it makes sense to lift the civilization into the air. Sorry, guys, I just remembered a hilarious metaphor. Like, imagine when you were a kid, somebody threw you into the air. Now we want to throw the civilization. Like a parent, like, my father, when I was young, he would throw me in the air. Anyway. I feel we have to something very crucial I gotta say, technologies. So a civilization is defined by, you can say, the potential of a civilization is defined by its most advanced technology, and we as human beings, we have been ignorant to a technology that we have been using so long, and even to this day it is still the most advanced, and I call that an inner technology, and it's the inner technology of language. Okay, so if we consider language as an inner technology, we are the user of technology. We are in the vehicle. It's like Tony Stark isn't the Iron Man suit, you know? And because Tony Stark isn't the Iron Man suit, it's another way of saying the experiencer of phenomena is not the phenomena. And this is a very, of course, mystical ideal, that there is an observer that is the whole moment, not just a component to it, not just a part of the moment. So I find imagine a civilization instantly. It align when we fix the educational system. Ooh, that's gonna be the greatest generator. It's as if, think of all these programs I'm saying. There are engines we're designing for civilization 2.0, the systems of bringing momentum for a sort of new approach. Now, in regards to so there are inner technologies that require to advance, and there are outer technologies. Right now in 2020, what is the most useful thing that I find human beings can do? They can, in some sense, we can update our inner technologies, our comprehension of behavior, psychology, and philosophy. But when there's going to occur a technological revolution. When that technological revolution happens, it will be a different time. And it's another way of saying that your grandkids might be wondering if they're in a video game or not, in a more deeper existential philosophical sense. So the existential mystery now goes to, it's like the world is a confusion man finds his eyes open in, and then suddenly the person sees that it's like the cyberspace culture, children getting lost in virtual reality simulations. Um, how can I tell you? It's we are, I don't know. There's this strange urge of a percentage of our civilization to trap itself into a box, into a technological box. And I don't know why, but perhaps it's needed. Um, anyways, so for now, guys, I don't know how much listeners in the world will feel engaged with what I'm saying here. But I'm going to say this, anyone who hears this talk and you feel something experientially change in you, uh, till the end of time, you're welcomed to uh, find me and contact me about the effort for Civilization 2.0. Because honestly, we are at a point where more inner technologies are moving more than our outer technologies. But when we get to a time where, imagine how many thoughts a person has throughout the day, now imagine uh, external technology evolving at a pace so quick that not only we won't be able to measure it or monitor it, it would just be as if it would become a black hole. I actually feel that the technological singularity is well named, that it is actually making the perhaps technology in the future so incomprehensible that we will suddenly feel an event horizon from a technology that will pull us into outside of the human nature, you know, because it's not, guys, I mean, look at the trend that human activity is going. People are just waiting in lines to buy the new phone, to buy the new technology. And this is, I'm not ridiculing, I'm not saying this is bad, I'm just saying that just look at the pattern is people constantly are looking for stuff, you know. Now it's going to turn into a point perhaps in the future, in the next 150 to 200 years, where it's going to be perhaps like we're going to turn ourselves into stuff. That means the guy suddenly uh, gets a robotic hand, and he's like, why do I have only one robotic hand? Let me get the two robotic hands. Then the guy gets two robotic hands, and then he's like, what about my legs, man? Let me get robotic legs so I can run faster. And he gets robotic legs, and eventually the person is like bit by bit through a blind desire, allowing their human nature to fall prey to a system where their free will no longer be the pillar of it. Right now, you are a biological, natural human being, and your free will is the pillar of your intelligence. But if, let's say, in the future there comes a time where nature forbid, it's like a situation where uh, imagine being a parent and right now some parents are they get angry at their child getting a tattoo. Imagine one day your child comes home and your child is not, there isn't a tattoo, your child is a robot, and you're like, holy shit, you know. You know, so it's a transformation of nature, and the engagement of the youth with culture is very crucial because they're running into a minefield where experience is the teacher. So I feel that we must. What can one do really? I mean, like I feel our solution to human extinction is like that scene from Lord of the Rings 3, where Theoden King, they defeat the army that's in front of that kind of mountain kingdom, and then they look to the left. Theoden King, the king of Rohan, the cavalry soldiers, they suddenly look to the other side after they win the first battle, and they're like, holy shit, giant mammoths are coming towards us. So it's becoming a situation where in that movie scene, Theoden's king is like, oh god, mammoths. He's like his he. There's a sort of hopelessness, but then once that wave of hopelessness hits, there's the retaliation, there's the effort, there's the horns of Rohan sing, and the Theoden king marches towards the enemy. You know, and so that was the fascinating. You know, honestly, Theoden King, like in Lord of the Rings, he's one of my favorite characters because he has this scene where he's Gandalf, like the wizard, that kind of wakes him up, you know, from his kind of deluded servant. um, there's a scene where Theoden King, this king, has his son has died, and they bring back the body of his son, and they burn it honorably. And it's like in that moment, Theoden King, he's a king, but he breaks down into tears, and Gandalf is there as like this kind of wise beacon. And Theoden King says, "What was, I don't remember the exact words, but it's like, what father should bury his son?" You know, and it's as if the father's breaking, as if he has lost hope. His future has, as if the future, it's a foreshadowing of how the future of humanity was going away, you know. And what happens is that Gandalf says, "Don't worry, he will find his spirit will find his way to the halls of your forefathers." And that's the thing. that really what consciousness has to do or can do in empty space is novel effort. And so, really, once we get a awareness of the language threshold, of the linguistic simulation that we're all living in the moment we speak to one another, the moment we move, the moment individual consciousness becomes apparent. Something about the educational system. I want to say a few more things about that before I end off. I've had these ideas. I feel these are revolutionary ideas for the educational system, but I don't know. Hopefully, it can be done. I feel that first of all, the curriculum needs to change. The whole style of the educational system needs to change. It needs to encourage participation and engagement and novelty more than regurgitation of the past. The past, we've seen it, great. The future, we haven't. We build it. You know, there's a saying in the tech sector where they say the easiest way to predict the future is by building it, right? So that should be the inspiration of the educational system. So one thing should be that every child on earth who is graduating from any grade in the educational system has to plant a tree. I was like, what is this? Why are children using so much paper at school but none of them planting trees? You know, and so it's there should be this strict global kind of law, and it's I feel it's like it's a good law, it's a good strict law. And what it is every child has to plant a tree. So for example, in Western countries it would be like every child has to plant 12 trees before they can in some sense what do you call it, get their diploma. You know, so when you think about it, it's as if so many children are going to be planting so many trees. Okay. The second thing is I attended my middle school in Tehran International School, pretty much the only English teaching school in Iran. And this was after I had returned, my family kind of had returned from Canada for a few years back to Iran for business reasons. So I had no choice. But in that school, there were so many stairs, and in those stairs, every day after like lunch break, and in Iran, the schools are segregated. So it was an all boys IB system international school, and so pretty much in the breaks, first of all, in regards to, let me tell you, bullying, there was no bullying. It was a battlefield. You just automatically accepted yourself. Even the littlest kids accepted it was a battlefield. It was funny, you know. It was like you just accepted it, you know. And I got into a lot of fights there. But um, after the break, we would have to climb a lot of stairs, and we would go up these set of stairs. And I first later on, years later, I suddenly thought, what if all those stairs, all those kids after recess walking up all the stairs? First of all, they're kids getting exercise. Second thing, the stairs can generate some sort of power. Imagine you put your foot on the stairs and the stair went in. The stair went in. You know. So every educational system would have stairs, and stairs would generate the power of the building. The second thing is, this is the most crucial thing about the evolution of the educational system. Right now, knowledge, of course, it's being worded. Every branch of the educational system in academia has its own nomenclature, has its own language, has its own words, pretty much. And what that means is these words point to different images. And so, for example, a mechanical engineer is comprehending science differently than you can say um, a surgeon. Okay, so I kind of feel like the primary school should just be health, should be medical sciences. I feel we should teach medical sciences to children very early on. You know, just like how you see these 6-year-old kids play piano, we should have 6 year, like, I don't want to say 6-year-old doctors, but but like, you know what I mean, like at a young age we should bring in medical sciences, and then middle school, or even maybe earlier than that. I'm not sure how. I still haven't sat down on the drawing board that long, but I'll say like this, like, pretty much I realized the hardest questions of humanity, the youngest children who have the most vivid imaginations don't have an answer to. And actually, I would even say this can even stretch into primary school, where super young kids, we ask them, how would you solve all world problems? You know, how would you solve hunger? How would you, world hunger? How would you solve world poverty? And the kid, it's like a little kid, but has enough of an intelligence. That way, the child will feel they're contributing. They're contributing something to the educational system, you know. The whole thing is that it's like knowledge doesn't have monetary value, so that's why a lot of kids are in the streets. But imagine if knowledge did. Imagine if children at a young age were paid for their assignments, and those who got an A were paid a bit more. Do you know how many straight A's kids would be? You know how many thug kids in the streets would run back to school to make sure they're getting that paycheck after their assignment? So that's one way of kind of revolutionizing education, by seeing what is the value that is taking children's attention out. And the other thing is the need for teachers. I feel in the future we're not going to need teachers. It's going to be like cinema, you know, or three-dimensional like light holograms. Let me tell you why. The teacher actually is unnecessary when entertainment through cinematic experience can be more clarifying. The teacher is necessary though, but when, so imagine 50% of the class, you see a film, the 50% after kids have been in this kind of cinematic vibe, they're inspired by the movie they just saw. So they have inspiration, right? So now the teacher comes and does some sort of thing where the teacher's like, all right, students, all right, the world has been trying to solve this problem. Do you know this? And you guys could be the first to answer it. You know, the teachers will no longer be teachers. They will be kind of like tour guides into the greater challenges of humanity. We're not a civilization here to have a snapshot photo, you know, and be like, okay, that snapshot world peace. You know, it's a vision. It's a dynamic process. It's like riding a horse. You can't, or skydiving. You know, it's an experience, right? And we have devalued experience. That's why the educational system doesn't update, because it is not getting access to the direct experiences of people, right? And I personally realized speech is the most efficient way to communicate a lot of ideas, but writing is an efficient way to communicate ideas exactly, like with a polished architecture, you know, with a polished structure. And so, let us hope that the eyes of the world open to the vision of Civilization 2.0. Um, a giant work that I'm working on. Pretty much, it's not going to be even finished. I'm pretty much. I feel I might be in. I've given it maybe like 10, 20 years, and that's if I sit down and start writing it. Incredibly, I mean, what I do is it's kind of like I design the foundation of an idea and then I expand it. Uh, so that way, the foundation, I know how the idea emerged. Um, but anyways, guys, I hope in this episode, um, I don't know. I hope it's we we realize it's valuable to care for the future generations, and there is always an efficient angle. There is always. I am telling you, just have patience, and in many moments of your life, if you just look, if you get rid of the bias of more, the dualism of good or bad, trust me, your eyes will see many things. And so let us hope that when Civilization 2.0 arrives, uh, we will be living in a way where our children's 1,000 years, perhaps from many years, let's say 10,000 years from now, if we can somehow continue, keep restoring Earth like a phone, recharging it, heavenizing it, you know. And so I remember, guys, this is so poetic for me because three words have found me so many times in my life, and it's rise, mankind, rise. You know, rise, mankind, rise. That's I can't tell you how many times in my inner realms that those three words have appeared, and now I can tell you that is the slogan of Civilization 2.0. Rise, mankind, rise towards the orbit. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope this talk was helpful. Much blessings, and feel free to support me on Patreon, where I will share also exclusive updates on my work. Blessings.